During the funeral, the dog's persistent barking at its owner's coffin raised concerns. After some hesitation, the mourners decided to open it, only to be met with a horrifying discovery. The morning of Officer Ethan Carter's funeral arrived, gloomy and damp, with steady rain falling as a solemn crowd made its way through the cemetery gates. Among the attendees were his family members, whom he hadn't seen in nearly 5 years. They had flown in from California to New York that very morning, taking their seats beside the coffin. Soon after, Ethan's fellow officers arrived, all clad in uniform, except for one, a large, loyal dog named Max. Max had been Officer Carter's K-9 partner, and losing his handler had left him devastated. The grief-stricken K-9 sat by the officers' feet as they gathered near the coffin. At first, the only sounds that filled the air were quiet sobs from Ethan's family. But then, Max stood up and approached the casket, his nose twitching as he sniffed along its edges. A soft whimper escaped from his throat, followed by a sharp bark that startled the mourners. Concerned, some officers tried to pull the dog away, but Max refused to budge. He continued barking insistently, tugging against his leash. Many assumed the loyal companion was simply overwhelmed by grief, until they discovered a shocking truth hidden within the coffin. The bond between a man and his dog. Ethan Carter had joined the police force in 2012, immediately setting his sights on the K-9 unit. From childhood, he had always loved dogs, forming a deep connection with his first pet, who had passed away 2 years before Ethan joined the force. Though heartbroken, he was ready to welcome a new K-9 partner into his life. At the same time, Max, a seasoned K-9 officer, had recently lost his handler under tragic circumstances. Normally, dogs in Max's position would be placed for adoption through the department's partnership with local shelters. However, Max was wary of strangers and struggled to trust new handlers, making it difficult for him to find a new home. Over the past year, several officers had been assigned to Max, but despite his impeccable work ethic, he never bonded with any of them. As a result, the loyal but aloof K-9 was deemed difficult to place. Dogs that couldn't form strong connections with their handlers were often retired early, and time was running out for Max, until Ethan stepped in. Despite warnings that Max was slow to trust, Ethan was determined. On their first meeting, he arrived prepared, armed with treats and a comfortable dog bed, waiting in the back of his patrol car. As Max was led toward him, Ethan extended a hand, allowing the dog to sniff him. Max let out a single bark, then lay down, observing his new handler cautiously. From that moment on, they were partners. A reluctant friendship. The first few weeks passed uneventfully. Ethan and Max worked efficiently as a team, handling routine calls in their small town. However, despite their seamless coordination on duty, Max kept his emotional distance. While he followed commands, ate the food provided, and never left Ethan's side during shifts, he refused to go home with his handler after work, choosing instead to sleep in the station's kennels. Ethan had gone to great lengths to make his home a welcoming place for Max. He had transformed a corner of his apartment into a cozy space, filled with blankets, toys, and treats, all waiting for the day Max would finally trust him enough to come home. But the bond he hoped for remained elusive. Everything changed 2 months later. A life-saving mission. A distress call came into the station. A young girl named Katie had gone missing while hiking. Search teams had scoured the area but failed to locate her, and calls to her phone went unanswered. With time running out, Ethan and Max were deployed. Max had a reputation as the department's top search and rescue dog, and everyone was hopeful he could succeed where others had failed. Upon arrival, Katie's parents provided a piece of her clothing. Max sniffed it thoroughly before taking off in the opposite direction of where searchers had been looking. Unbeknownst to everyone, Katie had changed her planned route, veering onto an unmarked trail. As Max sprinted ahead, Ethan struggled to keep up, his grip slipping from the leash. The dog disappeared into the trees, his sharp barks echoing through the forest. After several minutes of frantic searching, the rescue team arrived at a steep ravine. Recent storms had caused a section of the trail to collapse, leaving Katie stranded several feet down. She had attempted to climb back up but had lost consciousness. Max stood at the edge, barking urgently. As Ethan stepped forward, the ground beneath him began to crumble. Gas filled the air as he struggled to maintain his footing. Sensing danger, Max whined and lunged toward him. Acting quickly, Ethan grabbed the dog's harness and pulled him back to safety just as the ground gave way. Rescue crews worked swiftly to retrieve Katie. She was dehydrated and injured, but would make a full recovery, thanks to Max's instincts. That night, after their shift ended, Ethan opened the door to his cruiser. For the first time, Max didn't hesitate. He curled up in his waiting bed, tail wagging as Ethan patted his head. At last, the bond had been formed. A partnership like no other. Over the next year, Ethan and Max became inseparable. Even the officers who had struggled to connect with Max before were thrilled to see the duo's unbreakable friendship. Together, they worked side by side, handling cases with unwavering dedication. But in July 2013, everything changed. For months, a gang of burglars had been targeting warehouses, escalating from theft to violence. After a security guard was found fatally shot, the police department prioritized catching the criminals. That night, Ethan and Max were assigned to patrol a newly opened warehouse outside the city. With recruitment numbers low, a rookie officer named Michael was sent along with them. Despite his inexperience, the department allowed him to assist, as long as he was paired with a seasoned officer. The trio prepared for their shift, unaware that danger lurked in the shadows. The warehouse owners had not hired security personnel or installed any surveillance cameras. However, the company used the facility to store high-value items, making it a prime target for criminals. The department decided to have the trio stake out the area in an unmarked car, watching for any suspicious activity. Hours passed, and just as the pair was about to give up, Max let out a soft growl. His partner looked up just in time to see a dark figure slinking along the side of the building. Ethan quickly signaled to Michael, and the trio cautiously approached the building, weapons drawn. Michael took the left side of the facility, while Ethan and Max covered the right. Shortly after they split up, Max let out another low growl. Officer Carter spotted 3 individuals in black hoodies attempting to break into the warehouse's back door. Drawing his service weapon, he carefully ordered them to freeze and raise their hands. The suspects hesitated for a moment, and it seemed as though everything was under control. However, the situation quickly escalated when Max let out a sudden yelp, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. One of the thieves had managed to sneak up behind Michael. As the rookie turned the corner to join his fellow officers, the assailant opened fire. Chaos erupted. Ethan barely had time to radio in a distress call before another attacker lunged at him. By the time additional officers arrived, the criminals had fled the scene. Max and his 2 handlers were injured, and the officers were rushed to the hospital. While the K-9 officers' injuries were not severe, the hospital later informed the department that Officer Carter had succumbed to his wounds. Max had lost his partner once again. The department arranged the fallen officer's funeral, as his family lived far away. Michael, the other officer, was placed in a coma to recover from his injuries. On the day of the funeral, Ethan's family flew in, and Max, who had been in the care of another officer, was brought to pay his last respects. Everything seemed to proceed normally until Max suddenly began barking at the casket. Officers, including Max's new handler, tried to calm him, but nothing worked. His distress deeply affected the grieving family, who were heartbroken by the display of loyalty. Despite everyone's efforts, Max refused to quiet down. His new partner was even pulled off his feet as the determined canine broke free, racing toward the casket once again. As soon as Max reached it, his barking became frantic, and nothing could calm him. No one knew what to do until a senior officer explained that K-9 officers sometimes reacted this way and usually calmed down after seeing their handler's face. Though hesitant, Ethan's mother, unable to bear Max's distress, finally agreed to open the casket. The moment the lid was lifted, she screamed in horror. The body inside was not Ethan Carter. A stunned silence fell as she demanded answers, while Max finally lay still, as if he had known all along. The funeral was halted and an investigation began. It was soon discovered that the hospital had misidentified the officers due to a chaotic night and unchecked IDs. Ethan, badly beaten, had been placed in a coma under Michael Collins' name, while Michael, who had passed away, was mistakenly identified as Ethan. The mix-up would have gone unnoticed if not for Max's insistence. A proper funeral was held for Michael, and a month later Ethan woke up. Grieving his fallen colleague, he took time to heal, with Max by his side every step of the way. A year later, he passed his recertification and rejoined the force with his loyal partner. Thanks to Max's unwavering devotion, the truth was uncovered, giving both families the closure they deserved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing tales.